They said the Alpha King's bloodline ended the night his wife was murdered. They said the royal crest would never burn on a woman's skin again. But when Thea Winterscar pulled that dying infant from the snow, she didn't just save a life, she started a war. The moment the baby touched her, the king's mark seared into her flesh. And Zephyr wasn't hunting for a lover. He was hunting for a thief. The cold in the northern territories wasn't just a temperature. It was a living, breathing predator. It chewed through boot leather and settled into the marrow of your bones. It turned breath into white ghosts and made your lungs ache with every inhale. The kind of cold that reminded you that nature didn't care if you lived or died. Thea Winterscar knew the cold better than she knew her own reflection. She was 22, but her eyes held the exhaustion of a woman twice that age. Her coat was 3 sizes too big, patched with mismatched wool that had seen better decades. Her boots were held together by sheer willpower, and duct tape the soles so thin she could feel every rock beneath the snow. The frost root basket on her back was only half full. 3 more bushels, just 3 more, and maybe the head cook would give her the meat stew tonight instead of the broth. Maybe she'd get a corner spot in the Omega barracks instead of the middle where the cold air pooled. Maybe. She was scavenging near the deadline, the border between the Blackwood Pact territory and the Rogue Lands. It was a place where pine trees grew twisted and black, where the silence was heavy enough to crush your lungs. The patrol guards rarely bothered checking the deadline. Too dangerous. Too barren. That was why Thea came here. Less competition, more frost root, more survival. Her wolf stirred in the back of her mind. Ember, a small, timid creature who'd never been strong enough to fully manifest. Thea had tried to shift once when she was 16. Her bones had cracked, her skin had rippled, but nothing happened. Just pain, just failure. The pack healer said she was broken. The elders said she was cursed. The other Omegas whispered that her parents' deaths in the mine collapse 3 years ago had been punishment for producing a defective daughter. Thea learned to stop listening. She bent down her numb fingers, digging through the frozen earth. The frost root came up in chunks, ice clinging to the pale tendrils. She worked methodically, efficiently. No wasted movement. Every calorie counted when you were living on scraps. Her breath puffed out in white clouds. The sun was setting early the way it always did in winter. She had maybe an hour before full dark, another hour before the temperature dropped from dangerous to deadly. Then she heard it, a sound so faint the wind almost tore it apart before it reached her ears. A crumb, thin, reedy, fragile. Thea froze her hand, hovering over the frost root. Her pulse spiked. Ember perked up inside her mind, ears twitching. Pup. Smells like iron and milk. It's probably a trap, Thea thought. Rogues often use lures, desperate sounds to draw in unsuspecting Omegas. She'd heard the stories, seen the empty spots in the barracks where girls never came back. But the cry came again. Weaker this time, a gurgle of despair. Thea's hands trembled. Her rational mind screamed at her to turn around, to walk away, to survive another day. But her feet were already moving. She dropped the basket. She scrambled over a ridge of jagged ice, sliding down into a shallow ravine. The snow here was deep, undisturbed, pristine white except for one spot. About 20 yards away, beneath the skeletal branches of a dying spruce, there was a disturbance. A splash of color that didn't belong in this monochrome world. Deep royal purple. Velvet. Thea's heart hammered against her ribs. She approached slowly, the snow crunching loudly under her boots. As she got closer, the smell hit her. It wasn't the rot of death, it was something else. Rain, ozone, and underneath it all, something uniquely sweet. She fell to her knees, her hands trembling as she reached for the purple bundle. It was half buried. She brushed the snow away frantically, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Wrapped in velvet so fine it must have cost more than Thea's life earnings, was a baby. He was blue. His lips were the color of a bruise. His tiny eyes were squeezed shut. His chest wasn't moving. The cold had already seeped into his tiny limbs, turning his skin to ice. Oh God. No, 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 no. Panic flooded Thea's system, sharp and bright. She didn't think about politics. She didn't think about whose baby this was. She stripped off her heavy gloves, her bare hands instantly stinging in the freezing air. She needed skin-to-skin contact. It was the only way to transfer heat quickly. With clumsy fingers, she unzipped her oversized coat and pulled up the layers of her thermal shirt. The cold air hit her exposed skin like a slap. She scooped the icy bundle up, pressing the infant directly against the bare skin of her chest, tucking him inside her coat, cocooning him against her heartbeat. Please, please breathe. Come on, little one. She poured her own body heat into him, rocking back and forth in the snow. Her wolf whined in distress, pushing every ounce of energy toward the child. For a long minute there was nothing, just the wind howling through the ravine, just the cold settling deeper into Thea's bones. She closed her eyes, tears freezing on her lashes. Then a twitch, a small jerky movement against her ribs. Then a gasp. The baby inhaled, a sharp rattling breath, and let out a high-pitched scream of displeasure. Yes, Thea laughed, a hysterical sound. Yes, scream. Scream at me. And then it happened. The moment the baby's tiny hand, instinctively searching for warmth, flattened against Thea's bare shoulder blade, the world exploded into white. It wasn't snow blindness, it was pain. A searing, branding heat erupted on the skin of her left shoulder, exactly where the baby's hand rested. It felt like someone had pressed a cattle brand fresh from the forge onto her flesh. Thea screamed, her back arched, her body convulsing, but she didn't let go of the baby. She couldn't. Her arms locked around him as if magnetized. The smell of burning flesh filled the air, mixing with the crisp scent of snow. Mark, Ember screamed in her mind. The Mark. Thea fell onto her side, gasping for air, the snow melting beneath her cheek from the heat radiating from her shoulder. The pain subsided as quickly as it had come, leaving behind a dull, throbbing ache. Shaking violently, she managed to pull the coat open just enough to look at her shoulder. The baby was crying loudly now, his skin flushing pink with life. His little fists waved in the air. Healthy, alive. But Thea wasn't looking at the child. She was looking at her own skin. Etched in angry red lines that were already turning into raised silver scar tissue, was a symbol she had only seen on flags and statues. A wolf's head wearing a crown of thorns impaled by a crescent moon. The crest of the Alpha King. The crest of House Nightbane. That's impossible, Thea whispered, terror gripping her throat tighter than the cold ever could. The king has no heir. The queen is dead. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The baby had stopped crying, nuzzling into her chest with a contented sigh. She could feel his heartbeat, not just against her skin, but inside her own chest. A second pulse layered over hers. What is this? What did I just freeze? The command thundered from the ridge above. Thea's head snapped up. Standing silhouetted against the gray sky were 5 wolves. They weren't patrol guards. They were too large, too coordinated, too lethal. The Obsidian Unit, the king's elite guard. They shifted into human form with fluid, lethal grace. The sound of bones cracking and reforming echoed through the ravine. Steam rose from their bare skin as they materialized into men wearing tactical black gear. The man in the lead was Commander Kane Ironpaw, a man known for executing traitors before they even finished their sentences. Step away from the B'Talalu Omega. Kane's voice was a growl as he slid down the ridge, a Glock 19 in his hand. His eyes were the color of steel. His jaw was set in a hard line. I can't, Thea stammered, clutching the coat tighter around the baby. He's freezing. I found him. He was... Kane stopped 10 feet away. He sniffed the air. His eyes went wide. That scent. He looked from the shivering Omega to the bundle in her coat. Then his gaze locked onto the exposed skin of her collarbone, where the fresh mark was still smoking slightly in the cold air. The color drained from the commander's face. He lowered the gun, but his expression didn't soften. It hardened into something terrified. Secure her, Kane ordered his men, his voice shaking. Do not touch the child, and do not let her touch anyone else. We take her directly to the king. Wait, I didn't steal him, Thea cried as 2 guards grabbed her arms, hauling her up. I found him. He was dying. You better pray that's true, Kane said grimly, because you are wearing the king's claim, girl. And if that baby has a scratch on him, Zephyr Nightbane will peel that mark off your skin himself. The ride to the capital Obsidian Peak was a blur of motion sickness and terror. Thea was thrown into the back of an armored SUV, sandwiched between 2 silent guards who smelled of gunpowder and dominance. The baby, who she now understood was a boy, had fallen asleep against her chest, soothed by her heartbeat. Every time the guards tried to take him, the infant would shriek, a sound that made the wolves in the car flatten their ears in submission. It was an alpha command, even from an infant. So they let her hold him. Thea looked out the tinted window as the towering structure of the Nightbane estate came into view. It wasn't just a house. It was a fortress of black stone and glass built into the side of the mountain like a wound in the earth. She was Thea Winterscar, the daughter of a disgraced tunnel digger. She wasn't supposed to be here. The car screeched to a halt in the courtyard. The doors were ripped open. Move, Kane barked. They marched her through the grand halls. The floor was marble, reflecting her dirty, oversized boots. Servants gasped and pressed themselves against the walls as the procession passed. They could smell it too. The overwhelming scent of royal alpha coming from the bundle in the dirty Omega's arms. They reached the double doors of the throne room. Cain didn't knock. He pushed the doors open. The room was vast, lit by a massive fireplace and cold winter sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. At the far end, sitting not on the throne but on the steps leading up to it, was a man, King Zephyr Nightbane. He was staring at a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a year. His dark hair was messy, his jaw lined with stubble, and his shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the scars of a dozen wars. Since Queen Aurelia died 2 years ago, Zephyr had become a ghost, a violent, ruthless ghost. Cain Zephyr said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in Thea's chest. He didn't look up. I told you I didn't want to be disturbed unless the borders were breached. My King Cain said, dropping to one knee. You need to see this. Zephyr sighed, putting the glass down. He stood up, unfolding his massive frame. He was 6'5", of pure lethal muscle. He turned his eyes the color of molten gold onto the group. His gaze swept over Cain, then landed on Thea. He frowned. Why have you brought a scavenger into my court? She was found at the deadline, my King Cain said, his voice tight. With cargo. Thea trembled. The baby stirred in her coat. Zephyr froze, his nostrils flared. He inhaled deeply. The glass on the floor shattered as his aura exploded outward. It was a wave of pressure so heavy Thea's knees almost buckled. The guards around her took involuntary steps back. That scent, Zephyr whispered. He moved. He was in front of her in a blink faster than humanly possible. He towered over her, radiating heat and aggression. His hand shot out, grabbing her chin, forcing her to look up at him. Where did you get it? He snarled. Where did you get the child? I found him? Thea whimpered, tears leaking from her eyes. In the snow, under a spruce tree. He was dying. Zephyr's hand dropped to the bundle. He pulled the velvet aside with trembling fingers. When he saw the baby's face, the Alpha King let out a sound that was half sob, half growl. He recoiled as if burned. Impossible, he breathed. Aurelia lost the baby. The doctor said he died with her. The court was silent. Everyone knew the story. 2 years ago, the queen was attacked. She died and the unborn heir was declared dead, cut from her womb by assassins. He's alive, Thea whispered. He's cold, but he's alive. Zephyr reached out to take the child. His large, scarred hands trembled. He lifted the baby from Thea's arms with the care of a man handling glass. The moment the contact between Thea and the baby was broken, the infant's eyes snapped open. They were gold, just like Zephyr's. And he screamed. It was a blood-curdling shriek of pain. The baby thrashed in his father's arms, reaching back toward Thea with desperate little fists. Shh, Zephyr tried to soothe him, panic rising in his voice. I have you. I have you. But the baby wouldn't stop. He turned purple, choking on his own cries. His little body convulsed. Give him back to her, Cain shouted, forgetting protocol. He's rejecting the separation. Zephyr looked at Thea, confusion and rage warring in his eyes. He shoved the baby back into her arms. Instant silence. The baby grabbed Thea's shirt, let out a long sigh, and nuzzled into her neck. His breathing evened out. His color returned. Zephyr stared. He looked at the baby, then at Thea. Then his eyes dropped to her exposed collarbone. The coat had slipped during the struggle. The fresh, angry brand of the crest was visible, still radiating heat. Zephyr's pupils dilated until his eyes were almost black. He reached out his finger, tracing the air an inch above the burn on her skin. You bear the mark, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. The guardian mark. It only appears on the mother or the fated protector. He grabbed Thea's wrist, pulling her close. The smell of him overwhelmed her. Cedar, rain, raw power. Who are you? He demanded. Did you steal him? Did you work with the assassins? Is this a spell? No, Thea cried. I'm nobody. I'm just Thea. I found him. The mark appeared when I picked him up. King Zephyr. The doors to the throne room banged open again. A woman strode in. She was tall, blonde, and impeccably dressed in white silk. It was Lady Morgana Silverthorn, the king's advisor and the cousin of the late queen. Her eyes were sharp as flint. I heard a rumor, Morgana said, her heels clicking on the marble. They say a child was found. She stopped when she saw Thea. She saw the baby. And for a split second, Thea saw something in Morgana's eyes that terrified her more than the king's anger. She saw recognition, and she saw hatred. Oh, Zephyr, Morgana said, her voice dripping with false honey as she walked up to the king. Be careful. Look at her. She's a dirty Omega from the slums. This is clearly a trick. The rogues have enchanted a random child to look like your heir to infiltrate the court. Morgana pointed a manicured finger at Thea. She is a witch, and that mark on her skin, it's a glamour, a fake. Zephyr looked at Morgana, then back at Thea. The hope in his eyes began to fade, replaced by the icy paranoia that had ruled him for 2 years. A trick, Zephyr muttered. Yes, Morgana urged. Give the child to the medics. Throw this girl in the dungeon until we can interrogate her properly. No. Thea stepped back, clutching the baby. He cries without me. You saw it. He cries because you've put a hex on him, Morgana snapped. Zephyr's face hardened. The Alpha was back in control. Take the child, Zephyr ordered the guards. Please, Thea begged. 2 guards ripped the baby from her arms. As expected, the infant began to scream. A sound that tore at Thea's very soul. She felt it in her chest, in her bones, like hooks pulling her forward. Take her to the iron cell, Zephyr said, turning his back on her, though his hands were clenched into fists at his sides as the baby's screams echoed in the hall. If the child is not my blood, she dies at dawn. If the child is my blood, then we find out why she stole him. As the guards dragged Thea away, she locked eyes with Morgana. The blonde woman smiled, a small, cruel quirk of the lips. And Thea realized then that Morgana knew the baby wasn't dead, because Morgana was likely the one who had put him in the snow. And now Thea was the only loose end. The iron cells were not built for keeping people alive. They were built for breaking them. Located 5 stories beneath the Nightbane estate, the air smelled of rust, mildew, and old fear. The kind of fear that seeped into the stones over decades, centuries maybe. The kind that never left. Thea huddled in the corner of cell 4, her arms wrapped around her knees. They had taken her coat. She was shivering in her thin thermal shirt, the fabric doing nothing against the damp cold that rose from the concrete. But the cold of the dungeon was nothing compared to the phantom pain tearing through her chest. It was a physical sensation, like an invisible cord had been hooked into her heart and someone was dragging it upward, pulling, yanking, ripping. He's screaming. Ember whimpered in her mind. The pup is screaming. I know. Thea whispered into the dark, tears streaming down her dirty cheeks. I can feel him. Every time the baby upstairs, 5 floors above, took a ragged breath, Thea felt a sharp pang in her lungs. Every time he cried out in distress, her mark burned with sympathetic heat. The silver scar on her shoulder blade throbbed in time with his heartbeat. It was a torture she hadn't known existed. The bond wasn't just a symbol. It was a live neural link. 3 hours passed, or maybe 4. Time moved differently in the dark. There were no windows, no sounds except the drip of water somewhere in the corridor and her own ragged breathing. Then she heard it. The heavy steel door at the end of the corridor groaned open. Heavy footsteps echoed on the concrete. Not the rhythmic march of guards, but chaotic, thundering steps. The pace of someone losing their mind. Thea scrambled back against the damp wall, her heart hammering. The bars of her cell rattled as a key was jammed into the lock. The door swung open with a screech of metal on metal. King Zephyr filled the doorway. He looked worse than he had in the throne room. His tie was gone. His shirt was torn at the shoulder buttons missing. His eyes were wild, glowing with a feral golden light that made him look more beast than man. He smelled of distress and violence. Get up, he snarled. Thea tried to stand, but her legs were numb from the cold. She stumbled. Zephyr didn't wait. He stepped into the cell, grabbed her by her upper arm, and hauled her to her feet. His grip was bruising, but his hand was hot. So hot it almost burned through her shirt. Make it stop, he growled, his face inches from hers. What did you do to him? I didn't, Thea gasped, wincing as he dragged her out of the cell. I told you I didn't do anything. He is seizing, Zephyr said, his voice cracking. The invincible Alpha King sounded terrified. The doctors gave him sedatives. They gave him magic blockers. Nothing works. His heart rate is 200. He is dying, Omega. And if he dies, I will tear this building down with you inside it. He didn't bother with handcuffs. He dragged her toward the elevator, his fingers digging into her arm hard enough to leave marks. The ride up was suffocating. Thea was pressed against the metal wall, shaking while Zephyr paced the small space like a caged tiger. His breathing was harsh. His fists clenched and unclenched at his sides. It hurts him, Thea whispered, her hand going to her burning shoulder. Being away from me, it hurts him physically. Zephyr stopped pacing. He looked at her, his eyes narrowing. That is impossible. You are a stranger. A nobody. Why would my son choose you? I don't know, Thea cried back, finding a spark of courage somewhere deep inside. I didn't ask for this. I was just looking for frost roots. The elevator dinged. The doors opened directly into the Royal Medical Wing. The sound hit them instantly. It wasn't a cry anymore. It was a gasping wheeze, the sound of a throat that had screamed itself raw. Doctors and nurses were running back and forth, their white coats flapping. Machines were beeping frantically, alarms screaming. In the center of the room, inside a high-tech incubator, was the baby. He was convulsing. His skin was mottled and gray. His little chest heaved with the effort of breathing. Do something. Kane the commander was yelling at a doctor, his face pale. His hands were shaking. We've tried everything, Commander, a gray-haired physician said, sweat dripping down his temples. His heart is failing. His system is rejecting the treatment. It's like his soul is being ripped out. Zephyr shoved past the doctors, dragging Thea with him. He pushed her toward the incubator. Fix him, Zephyr ordered. If you are a witch, undo the spell now. Thea didn't need to be told. The moment she saw the baby, her own heart broke. She didn't care about the king or the guards or the guns pointed at her back. She reached into the incubator, her hands trembling. Careful, a nurse warned. He's convulsing, he might. Thea ignored her. She slid her hands under the tiny thrashing body. The baby's skin was cold again, too cold, like he'd been back in the snow. I'm here, she whispered, her voice trembling. I'm here, little wolf, I'm here. She lifted him out, pulling him against her chest, right over the spot where the mark was burned into her skin. The reaction was instantaneous. A visible ripple of golden energy pulsed from the baby, washing over Thea like a wave of warm honey. The convulsing stopped. The screaming cut off as if a switch had been flipped. The baby took one massive, shuddering breath. His tiny hands unclenched. They grabbed the fabric of Thea's dirty thermal shirt. He buried his face in her neck, letting out a long, whimpering sigh. The heart monitor, which had been screeching a high-speed alarm, suddenly slowed. Beep, 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 a steady, strong rhythm. The silence in the room was deafening. 10 doctors, 5 guards, the Alpha King, all staring in disbelief. The gray color faded from the baby's skin, replaced by a healthy pink flush. He wasn't just calm, he was content. He was purring. A low rumbling sound in his chest that only wolf pups made when they were perfectly safe. Thea closed her eyes, resting her chin on the baby's soft head. The pain in her shoulder vanished, replaced by a warm humming sensation. She felt weak, exhausted, but complete. He's asleep, she whispered into the silence. Zephyr took a slow step forward. He looked at the monitor, then at the baby, and finally at Thea. His expression was unreadable, a mix of awe and deep, unsettling suspicion. He reached out his hand, hovering over his son's back. He touched the baby gently. The boy didn't stir. He was in a deep, restorative sleep. Leave us, Zephyr said. Sir. The head doctor hesitated. The child needs monitoring, I said. Leave us. Zephyr roared, his alpha voice shaking the glass cabinets. The room cleared in 10 seconds. Only Kane remained by the door, hand on his weapon. Zephyr stood before Thea. The adrenaline was fading, leaving him looking exhausted. He looked at her dirty clothes, her matted hair, and the way she held his son like he was the most precious thing in the world. What is your name? He asked quietly. Thea, she said, looking down. Thea Winterscar. Winterscar. Zephyr tested the name. Lowborn Omega. No family. My parents died in the mines 3 years ago, she murmured. Zephyr walked around her, inspecting her like she was a specimen under glass. The bond you have, it's not a spell. I can smell it now. It's a guardian bond. It's ancient magic. It hasn't been seen in the Nightbane line for 500 years. He stopped in front of her. It means you have effectively become his life support. If you leave, he dies. If you are hurt, he feels it. Thea looked up, fear returning. Does that mean you're going to kill me? Zephyr looked at her, his golden eyes intense. No. It means I can't kill you. It means I am trapped. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. He reached out and with surprising gentleness, pulled the collar of her shirt down to reveal the mark. It was glowing faintly, a soft silver light pulsing in time with the baby's heartbeat. You are a hostage, Thea Winterscar, Zephyr whispered, but not in a dungeon. You will stay in this house. You will stay by his side every second of every day. You will eat what I tell you, wear what I tell you, and go where I tell you. He leaned in his lips, brushing her ear. Because if this baby dies, you won't live long enough to regret it. The next morning, Thea woke up in a bed that cost more than her entire childhood home. She was in the royal nursery suite. The room was massive, decorated in soft creams and golds. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked snow-covered mountains. A fireplace crackled softly in the corner. The baby, whom Zephyr had named Kalen, meaning ruler of all, was asleep in a crib right next to her bed. Thea sat up, wincing. Her body ached, but the gnawing hunger she had lived with for years was gone. Last night, a silent servant had brought her a tray of roast chicken, fresh bread, and fruit. She had eaten until she felt sick. She swung her legs out of bed and walked to the crib. Kalen was awake. He looked at her with those golden eyes, reached up a chubby hand and gurgled. "Hi," she whispered, smiling involuntarily. "You're a troublemaker, aren't you?" The door opened. It wasn't a servant, it was Lady Morgana. The blonde woman didn't knock. She walked in followed by a severe-looking man in a lab coat. Dr. Aris, the royal geneticist. Thea stiffened instinctively, stepping between Morgana and the crib. "Relax, Stray," Morgana sneered, flipping her long hair over her shoulder. "We're just here for the truth." Dr. Aris set a metal case on the table. "The king has ordered a full genetic sequencing," he said in a clipped voice. "We need to confirm the child's lineage. And yours." "Mine?" Thea asked. "To see if you're related to any enemies of the state," Morgana said, walking around the room, running her finger along the dust-free mantelpiece. "Or if you're just a common thief." Dr. Aris approached the crib. Thea tensed, but the bond remained calm. Aris was swift. He swabbed Kalen's cheek and took a small sample of blood from his heel. The baby whimpered but didn't scream. Then Aris turned to Thea. "Arm," he ordered. Thea rolled up her sleeve. He drew a vial of blood, the needle stings sharp. "Results will be ready in an hour," Aris said, packing up. "The king is waiting in his study." Aris left. Morgana lingered. She looked at Thea, her expression shifting from disdain to something colder. A calculated malice. "You think you've won the lottery, don't you?" Morgana asked softly. "Omega becomes mother to the Alpha King, the heir to the throne." "I don't want any of this," Thea said firmly. "I want to go home. Home to the mud." Morgana laughed. "Don't lie. Every Omega dreams of climbing into the king's bed. But listen to me carefully, little rat." Morgana stepped closer, her perfume cloying and sweet. Too sweet. It smelled like rotting lilies. "Zephyr is vulnerable right now. He's grieving. He's confused by this magic trick you pulled. But he will wake up. And when he realizes he's letting a gutter-born girl raise his son, he will dispose of you." Morgana leaned in, her breath hot against Thea's ear. "Enjoy the silk sheets while you can. Accidents happen in big houses like this. Stairs are slippery. Food can be spoiled. Babies are fragile." A low growl ripped from Thea's throat. It wasn't her. It was Ember reacting to the threat against the pup. Morgana's eyes widened in surprise. Then she smirked. "Feisty. Good. It will make breaking you more fun." She turned and left her heels clicking on the marble. An hour later, King came to collect Thea. He escorted her, carrying Kalen, to the king's private study. It was a room of dark wood and leather lined with books that smelled of aged paper and tobacco. Zephyr was sitting behind a massive mahogany desk. Dr. Aris stood by a holographic screen. Morgana was there too, sipping a glass of wine, looking smug. "Sit," Zephyr commanded. Thea sat in the leather chair, Kalen cooing in her lap. "The results are in," Zephyr said, his voice flat. He nodded to Aris. "The child is a 99.9% match to you," my King, Aris announced. "He is Kalen Nightbane, the son of Zephyr and Queen Aurelia." Zephyr closed his eyes for a moment. A spasm of pain crossed his face. "So he's Sarvivin. The assassins cut him out and stole him. It appears so," Aris said. "And the girl?" Zephyr asked, opening his eyes and fixing them on Thea. Aris tapped his tablet. "Thea Winterscar. Omega. Bloodline is clear. No relation to any known rogue factions." However, what Morgana leaned forward eagerly. "Her blood shows markers of extreme malnutrition and high levels of silverbane resistance," Aris noted. "She has lived near the deadline her whole life. But there is something else." Aris tapped the screen. A complex double helix appeared, rotating slowly. "Her genetic profile has a mutation. It's dormant, but it reacts to alpha DNA. It's what allows her to act as a surrogate anchor for the guardian bond. It's a biological anomaly, 1 in a billion. So she's a freak," Morgana summarized. "She is a necessity." Zephyr corrected, his voice hard. He looked at Thea. "The test confirms you are not the mother. You are not royalty, but you are the vessel that keeps my son alive." My King, Morgana interrupted, her voice sharp. "We cannot trust her. Look at the facts. The baby was found yesterday. Where has he been for 2 years? He's an infant. He hasn't aged. Someone put him in stasis." Zephyr went still. "Stasis?" Aris nodded. "If he was born when the queen died, he should be a toddler. He has been held in magical or cryogenic suspension." "Exactly," Morgana said, standing up. "This was a setup. Someone kept the air on ice, waited for the right moment, and then used this girl to infiltrate your home. She is a sleeper, Agent Zephyr." "You have to see that," Thea's heart hammered. It sounded plausible, even to her. "I don't know anything about stasis," Thea said, her voice shaking. "I swear, we should interrogate her again," Morgana suggested, her eyes gleaming. Properly this time. With Veritas serum. It might damage her mind, but we'll get the truth. Zephyr looked at Thea. He looked at the baby in her arms. Kaelin was chewing on Thea's finger, happy and safe. No, Zephyr said. Zephyr, Morgana cried. The bond protects the boy, Zephyr said. If we damage her mind, we damage him. I will not risk it. Morgana's face twisted in ugly rage for a split second before she smoothed it over. As you wish, my king. I only want to protect you. There is one more thing, Dr. Eris said hesitantly. The room went quiet. What is it, Zephyr asked. The toxicology report on the baby. Eris pulled up a chemical structure on the screen. It was complex with rings and chains that meant nothing to Thea but everything to the others. We found traces of a substance in the baby's blood. It's fading, but it's there. Nightshade orchid extract. The air left the room. Thea didn't know what that was, but Zephyr went rigid. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Nightshade orchid. Zephyr repeated, his voice terrifyingly low. That is the poison that killed Aurelia. Yes, Eris whispered. It's a rare poison, Zephyr said, walking around the desk. It doesn't grow in the deadline. It doesn't grow in the rogue lands. It only grows in the royal greenhouses. He turned to look at the room. His gaze swept over Thea, who looked confused. Then it moved to Morgana. Morgana went pale. Zephyr, surely you don't imply this girl. Zephyr pointed at Thea, has never been inside the walls of the city, let alone the royal greenhouses. She couldn't have poisoned him with nightshade. Someone could have given it to her. Morgana argued quickly. A handler, or Zephyr said, his eyes darkening. The person who poisoned my wife also poisoned my unborn son. They thought he died, but he didn't. He went into stasis because of the poison. His body shut down to protect himself. Zephyr walked toward Morgana. She took a step back. You managed the greenhouses, Morgana. After Aurelia died, you took over her projects. I maintained them in her honor, Morgana stammered. Zephyr, you are distraught. You are lashing out at family. Zephyr stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. Then he turned away. Cane Zephyr barked. Sir, double the guard on the nursery. No one enters without my direct permission. Not the staff, not the advisors. He paused, looking at his cousin. Not even family. Morgana gasped. You are isolating yourself. You are letting this peasant divide us. Get out, Zephyr said. Morgana glared at Thea, a look of pure, unadulterated promise of death. Then she spun on her heel and stormed out. The door slammed shut. Zephyr let out a long breath. He walked over to Thea. He leaned down, his hands gripping the arms of her chair, trapping her. You are innocent of the poison, he said, his face inches from hers. But that doesn't make you safe. It makes you a target. He reached out and touched Kaelin's cheek. The baby smiled. Morgana is right about one thing, Zephyr murmured, his eyes locking onto Thea's. You are in the lion's den now. If you want to survive, you need to stop acting like a victim and start acting like the mother of the heir. I don't know how, Thea whispered. Zephyr's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. The tension shifted. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was something heavier. Magnetic. Learn, Zephyr said huskily. Fast. The rumors spread through Obsidian Peak like a virus. The heir lives. The Omega found him. The king is enchanted. To quell the unrest, the High Council demanded proof. They wanted to see the child. They wanted to see the woman who carried the king's mark. And so against Zephyr's better judgment, the Winter Solstice Ball was moved forward. It was no longer just a celebration. It was a trial. Thea stood in the center of the nursery, staring at the box on the bed. It's from the king, a nervous maid said, bowing her head. Thea opened the black velvet lid. Inside lay a gown of midnight blue silk, dark as the deepest ocean. It was sleeveless with a high neck and a back that plunged dangerously low, designed to frame the guardian mark on her shoulder. Nestled on top of the silk was a necklace, a choker of white diamonds with a single massive sapphire drop. It was a collar, a beautiful, expensive collar. He wants me to look like I belong to him, Thea whispered. She bathed. The maid scrubbed the last of the deadline dirt from her skin. They applied oils that smelled of jasmine and crushed pearls. They painted her lips a deep crimson. When Thea looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize herself. The scared scavenger girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who looked like she could start a war, but the fear was still there, churning in her gut. She walked to the crib. Kaelin was awake, watching her. He was dressed in a tiny formal velvet suit. We have to be brave, little wolf, she told him, picking him up. The bond hummed, warm and steady. Safe, safe. A knock at the door. It wasn't a maid. King Zephyr walked in. He was wearing his formal military dress uniform, black with gold braiding, medals gleaming on his chest. a sword at his hip. He looked devastatingly handsome and terrifyingly powerful. He stopped dead when he saw her. His golden eyes swept over her body, lingering on the exposed curve of her neck. Then the mark on her shoulder, which the dress cleverly framed rather than hid. The mark was no longer red and angry. It was a shimmering silver tattoo. He didn't say she was beautiful. He didn't smile. He walked over the air around him, crackling with static electricity. "Turn around," he commanded softly. Thea obeyed, clutching Kaelin to her chest. Zephyr's warm fingers brushed the nape of her neck as he fastened the diamond choker. His touch sent shivers racing down her spine. He didn't step away. He stayed close behind her, his chest brushing her back. "Tonight you are not Thea the scavenger," he murmured into her hair. "Tonight you are the guardian. You are mine. Everyone in that room will want to tear you apart to get to my son. You will not let them." "I won't," she breathed. "Good." He stepped back, offering his arm. "Let's go feed them their lies." The grand ballroom was a sea of color and noise. 500 of the most powerful wolves in the territory were there. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across marble floors. Music played from a live orchestra. When the herald announced them, the silence was instant. His Majesty King Zephyr Nightbane, the heir Prince Kaelin, and the guardian Thea Winterscar. They descended the grand staircase. Zephyr kept her hand tucked firmly in the crook of his arm. Every eye was on them. Thea could smell the judgment, acrid and sharp. She could hear the whispers. "That's her, the gutter rat. Look at the mark. It's real. She's holding the prince like a shield." They reached the floor. Immediately the High Council members swarmed them. "My King Elder Thomas," said, his eyes greedy as he looked at the baby. "Is it true? Is this really Aurelia's son?" "See for yourself," Zephyr said coldly. Thea stepped forward. She didn't flinch. She angled Kaelin so the elders could see his face, but she kept her grip tight. Kaelin looked at the old man and let out a small bored huff. Then his eyes flashed gold. The elders gasped. The alpha gaze, even as an infant. "He is strong," Zephyr said, pride leaking into his voice. The music started. A waltz. Protocol dictated the king opened the floor. "Hold him," Zephyr ordered Cain, who was standing guard like a shadow. Thea hesitated, panic spiking as she handed the baby to the commander. "He is safe with Cain," Zephyr assured her. "Dance with me." He swept her onto the floor. His hand was large and hot on her waist. He pulled her flush against him, far closer than was proper. "People are staring," Thea whispered, trying not to trip. "Let them," Zephyr growled. "Let them see that you are under my protection. If they think we are lovers, they will be less likely to attack you openly." "Is that what this is?" Thea asked, looking up at him. A performance. Zephyr looked down at her. The golden fire in his eyes dimmed into something darker, more confused. "It started that way." His hand tightened on her waist. He spun her the world, blurring into a kaleidoscope of light. For a moment, Thea forgot the danger. She forgot she was an Omega. She just felt the heat of the man who had saved her life and whom she was saving in return. "Well, well, isn't this touching?" The voice broke the spell. They stopped turning. Lady Morgana stood there wearing a dress of blood-red satin. She held a glass of champagne, her smile tight and brittle. "May I cut in?" Morgana asked. "I haven't had a chance to welcome our guest." Zephyr's jaw tightened. "We were just finishing." "Nonsense," Morgana said. She stepped closer to Thea. "You clean up well, dear," Morgana said, "although you can still smell the mines if you get close enough." She leaned in, pretending to air-kiss Thea's cheek. "Enjoy the dance," Morgana whispered, her voice a hiss only Thea could hear. "Because by midnight, you'll be wishing you died in the snow." Before Thea could react, a piercing scream cut through the music. It came from the edge of the room. From Cain, or rather from the bundle in Cain's arms. Kaelin was shrieking. It wasn't a cry of hunger. It was a cry of pain. Thea tore herself from Zephyr's grip. "Kaelin." She sprinted across the ballroom floor, her heels slipping on the polished marble. Zephyr was right behind her. "I didn't do anything," Cain was saying, looking down at the baby in panic. He just started screaming. Thea grabbed the baby. The moment he touched her skin, the screaming didn't stop. It got worse. He was burning up. His skin was scorching hot. "He's burning," Thea cried, looking at Zephyr. "He's on fire." Zephyr touched the baby's forehead and hissed, pulling his hand back. "He's feverish. Massive spike." It's the bond, Thea realized. She looked around the room wildly. He's reacting to something nearby. Someone here. Someone has the poison. The music died. The crowd gasped. "Seal the doors." Zephyr roared, his voice shaking the chandeliers. "No one leaves." Morgana stood in the center of the floor, sipping her champagne. She looked at the chaos, and for the first time she smiled, a genuine smile. Too late, she mouthed. Then the lights went out. Thea woke to the roar of helicopter rotors and the bite of freezing wind. She wasn't in the ballroom anymore. She was being dragged through deep snow, her heels carving lines into the white wasteland. Her hands were bound with rope that cut into her wrists. Her dress was torn. She looked up gasping and her heart stopped. They were back at the deadline, the exact ravine where she had found the baby. The withered spruce tree stood like a skeletal guardian. The helicopter hovered above, kicking up a blinding storm of snow and ice. Standing by the tree was Lady Morgana Silverthorn, holding Kalen. The baby was silent, sedated. His little face was pale, too pale, and his eyes were closed. No, Thea tried to lunge forward, but Lieutenant Miller, a guard she recognized from the palace, tightened his grip on her arm. His face was blank, emotionless. He had betrayed them all. Why, Thea screamed over the wind. Why are you doing this? Morgana turned to face her. The blonde woman's perfect hair whipped around her face. She wasn't smiling anymore. She looked wild, unhinged. He ends where he began, Morgana shouted. She pulled a silver dagger from her belt. The blade gleamed in the helicopter's floodlights. The nightshade didn't kill him in the womb because of the cold, because the stasis protected him. So I brought him back to finish the job. She held the dagger over Kalen's tiny chest. A tragic kidnapping gone wrong. You and the bastard heir, dead in the snow. The rogues will take the blame. He's your family, Thea cried, struggling against Miller's iron grip. Morgana's face twisted with rage. He's a monster. She raised the dagger higher. And you are just a loose end. Thea didn't think. She let instinct take over. She sank her teeth into Miller's hand, biting down hard enough to taste blood. Miller howled, his grip loosening for just a split second. It was enough. Thea lunged forward, tackling Morgana just as the blade came down. They hit the snow hard, tumbling, and the dagger missed Kalen by an inch. It plunged into the frozen earth beside him. Shoot her, Morgana shrieked, kicking Thea off. Miller raised his rifle, his bitten hand shaking. The gunshot echoed through the ravine. But Thea didn't fall. Miller did. A hole appeared in his forehead. His eyes went blank. He dropped into the snow like a puppet with cut strings. On the ridge above, a massive shadow blocked the floodlights. A black wolf the size of a bear launched itself down the cliff face. It moved with terrifying speed, its paws barely touching the ice as it descended. It hit the ground with the force of a meteor. The impact sent a shockwave of snow radiating outward. The wolf shifted mid-air, bones cracking and reforming, and a man materialized. King Zephyr Nightbane. He was naked from the waist up, steam rising from his skin in the freezing air. His eyes burned with golden rage. His muscles were coiled, like springs ready to snap. Zephyr Morgana gasped, backing away from Thea. She kidnapped him. I was trying to say, but I heard you. Zephyr's voice was a low rumble that shook the ground beneath them. It wasn't human. It was the voice of a predator about to kill. You killed my wife. You tried to kill my son. He moved faster than sight. One moment he was 10 feet away. The next his hand was wrapped around Morgana's throat, lifting her feet off the ground. She clawed at his arm, gasping, her eyes bulging. But she was nothing against the Alpha King. Nothing against his strength, his fury, his grief turned to weapon. Zephyr threw her. She flew 10 feet through the air and slammed into the trunk of the pine tree with a sickening crunch. The sound of bones breaking echoed louder than the helicopter's rotors. Morgana crumpled into the snow. She didn't move. Zephyr fell to his knees, crawling toward Thea and the baby. His hands were shaking. Kalen? He choked out. Is he? He's alive, Thea sobbed, pulling the baby against her chest. The bond is holding. Zephyr wrapped his massive arms around them both. He buried his face in Thea's neck, breathing her in like she was oxygen. My mate, my family. Thea felt tears on her skin. She didn't know if they were hers or his, but their relief was cut short. A terrifying cracking sound thundered from the mountain above. Zephyr's head snapped up. No, the gunshots, the helicopter, the vibrations. All of it had destabilized the snowpack. Avalanche, Zephyr whispered, looking up at the wall of white death rushing toward them. There was nowhere to run. The ravine was too deep. The helicopter was already pulling away, its pilot panicking. Zephyr looked at the small hollow in the rock face behind them. It was barely large enough for two people. He shoved Thea and Kalen into the hollow. Get in. Now Thea scrambled backward, pressing herself and the baby as far into the shallow cave as possible. Zephyr turned his back to the oncoming avalanche. He braced his hands against the rock wall on either side of the opening, using his own body as a shield. Do not let go. He commanded, his eyes locking with hers one last time. The gold in his eyes was bright, fierce, full of something that looked like love. Then the mountain fell on top of them, and the world went black. Silence followed the roar. The world had compressed into a pitch-black pocket of ice and rock. Thea couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly. The air was thin and cold and tasted like metal. Zephyr was arched over her, his hands still braced against the rock wall. His broad back was taking the crushing weight of the snowpack. She could hear his breathing, ragged, strained, each inhale a struggle. "Zephyr," she whispered. "I've got you," he gasped. Blood trickled from his nose, black in the darkness. "I won't let it touch you." The bond between the three of them, Alpha Guardian and Air, generated a feverish warmth that kept the freezing cold at bay. Thea could feel it pulsing through her mark, a golden heat that wrapped around them like a shield. Kaelin was quiet against her chest, sleeping, trusting. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time meant nothing in the dark. Zephyr's breathing grew more ragged. The weight above them was immense, tons of snow and ice pressing down, trying to crush them. "If we don't make it," Zephyr whispered, his voice strained, "you need to know something." "Don't," Thea said, pressing her hand to his chest. She could feel his heart hammering. "Don't say that. Save your breath. My wolf chose you before the mark ever appeared." Zephyr continued as if he hadn't heard her. "I loved you the moment you walked into my court, dirty and defiant, and holding my son like he was yours." A sob caught in Thea's throat. "Don't say that," she repeated. "You don't get to say that and then die." Zephyr let out a weak laugh. It turned into a cough. "That's an order from your queen?" he asked. "Yes," Thea whispered fiercely. "That's an order from your queen." Silence. Just the sound of their breathing in the dark. Just the weight of the mountain trying to bury them. Then faintly a scratching sound echoed above. Thea's heart leaped. "Do you hear that?" The scratching grew louder, frantic. "Dig there," a voice roared from above. It was Cain. "Move, move, move." A beam of sunlight pierced the gloom. Snow and ice rained down as gloved hands reached through the opening. "We've got you," Cain shouted. "Hold on." They pulled Kaelin out first. The baby started crying the moment he left Thea's arms, but the sound was strong, healthy. Then they pulled Thea out, dragging her through the narrow opening. She gasped as fresh air filled her lungs. The world was blinding white. Finally, they pulled Zephyr. The Alpha King collapsed onto the surface, battered and bruised. His back was a mess of cuts and frostburn. But he was breathing, alive. A scout stood over a motionless lump by the pine tree. Cain walked over, checked for a pulse, and shook his head. Lady Morgana Silverthorn was dead, her neck broken by the impact against the tree before the avalanche even hit. The nightmare was over. Zephyr reached out from where he lay in the snow, his hand trembling. Thea took it. He squeezed weakly but with possessive strength. "Let's go home," she whispered. 6 months later, the Nightbane estate gardens were a riot of spring flowers. Purple and white blossoms covered every surface, bearing the memory of winter in color and life. Thea stood on the balcony of the royal quarters, smoothing down her gown of white silk. Below, thousands of pack members filled the courtyard, their voices rising in a roar of celebration. Flags waved in the wind. Banners bearing the Nightbane crest hung from every building. "You look nervous," Zephyr's voice rumbled behind her. She turned. He was walking toward her, fully dressed in his formal regalia, black and gold, the wolf crown on his head, but his eyes were soft as he looked at her. "I'm a tunnel digger's daughter," Thea said, touching the diamond tiara that had been placed on her head that morning, "about to be crowned queen. Of course I'm nervous." Zephyr wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "You survived the deadline," he murmured into her hair. "You survived the avalanche. You are more royal than anyone in this kingdom." He pressed a kiss to the mark on her shoulder, the silver tattoo that had become a symbol of pride instead of shame. They looked down at the playpen where Kaelin, now 10 months old, was pulling himself up on the bars. He was chubby and happy, laughing at the crowd below with his father's golden eyes. The trumpet sounded. "Ready?" Zephyr asked, offering his arm. Thea picked up their son, settled him on her hip, and took her mate's hand. "Ready." Together, they stepped out onto the main balcony. The crowd erupted. The noise was deafening. Cheers and howls and the sound of thousands of feet stomping in unison. The High Council stood in formation below. Elder Thomas stepped forward, his voice magically amplified. "People of the Nightbane territory," he proclaimed. "Today, we witness history." The crowd quieted. 6 months ago, Prince Kaelin was returned to us, saved by one who bore the Guardian mark, a bond not seen in 500 years. Thomas gestured to Thea. "Thea Winterscar, Omega, Survivor, Guardian." Today we recognize her not as a vessel, but as our Luna, our queen. Zephyr took the second crown from a velvet cushion held by Cain. It was smaller than his, more delicate but no less magnificent. Silver and moonstone. He placed it on Thea's head. "She is my Luna," Zephyr said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "My queen, mother of my heir, and anyone who harms her answers to me." The pack dropped to their knees in submission. In respect, 2,000 wolves kneeling. Kalen clapped his chubby hands together, giggling. Thea felt tears on her cheeks, but they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of something else, something she had never felt before. Belonging. The ceremony continued. Vows were spoken, oaths were taken. The council officially recognized the guardian bond as law, but Thea barely heard any of it. She was looking at Zephyr, at the way he held their son, at the way he looked at her like she was the sun. When the formal proceedings ended, Zephyr pulled her into a kiss. The crowd roared its approval. It wasn't their first kiss. That had happened months ago in the hospital when Zephyr had finally healed enough to pull her into his arms and claim her properly. But this kiss was different. This kiss was a promise. This kiss was forever. 1 year later, the spring garden was in full bloom again. But this time the flowers weren't just decorations. They were a playground. Thea sat on a blanket spread across the soft grass watching Kalen toddle after butterflies. He was almost 2 now, walking and talking and causing delightful chaos wherever he went. Zephyr was reading reports nearby, but he kept one eye on his son at all times. Mama Kalen called, holding up a flower he'd picked. "Look, it's beautiful," Thea said, smiling. Kalen ran over and plopped the flower in her lap. Then he noticed the slight swell of her belly. "Baby?" he asked, patting her stomach with his little hand. "Yes," Thea said softly. "Baby." Kalen's eyes, still that brilliant gold, flashed with understanding beyond his years. "Mine," he declared. Zephyr laughed, a deep rumbling sound, possessive just like his father. He set his reports aside and joined them on the blanket, pulling Thea against his chest. They sat like that for a long time, watching Kalen play. A family. Thea thought back to that night in the snow, to the moment she'd found a dying baby and her whole world had changed. She thought about the guardian mark on her shoulder, the bond that had saved them all, and she realized something. She hadn't just found Kalen in the snow. She had found herself. From scavenger in the frozen wastes to queen of the most powerful pack in the north, Thea had proved that true nobility wasn't about bloodlines. It was about the courage to protect what you love. Lady Morgana had thought the cold would kill the air. But she forgot one thing. Wolves don't freeze. They survive. And when they find their mates, they burn brighter than fire. It's a reminder that sometimes the hardest winters lead to the most beautiful springs. As the sun set over Obsidian Peak, casting the mountains in shades of gold and pink, Thea Winterscar Nightbane sat surrounded by her family, her mate, her son, the life growing inside her. And she smiled. Because she was finally home. If your heart was racing during that avalanche scene, this story reminded you that strength comes from the most unexpected places, that love can bloom even in the coldest winters, that sometimes the people who save us are the ones who needed saving most. Thea started as nobody, an omega with nothing, but she became everything, a guardian, a queen, a mother, and most importantly, she became herself. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you loved Thea and Zephyr's story, there are more tales of wolves and winter of bonds that defy fate and love that conquers all. Until next time, remember, you are stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and worthy of the crown you were meant to wear.